in Michigan's 8th district, which encompasses basically Lansing to Detroit, is my understanding. And Joe, you are running against the incumbent. I can't remember her name, but I do believe she's like a former CIA analyst that was on that focused on the Iraq War. Now, I'm not saying that she was maybe she was offering good policies and telling us to get out of Iraq, but I don't know. And you might have some more insight into that as well. So why don't you tell us who you are and why you're running and a little bit about your race?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Joe Hartman, and I'm running against Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, and she's a Democrat, and Paul Young, the Republican, who is a Trump immigration official. And generally, when I talk about my opponents, I just group them together and point to their similarities and try to contrast the libertarian argument with the arguments that they offer, representing the duopoly, or as Spike says, the Republicrats. And so, yeah, for my motivation for running, a lot of times I just say that I'm trying to have some fun and make some noise, and practice and get better at delivering the libertarian message and argument. And I enjoy the opportunity to talk to people about these ideas. I just think it's so engaging and interesting to have my own libertarian principles challenged, and also try to challenge other people's perspectives of the role of government in society. And so, since that's like my favorite thing to do, I figured I would have a lot more attention if I ran for Congress. And in Michigan, we had ballot access through the Libertarian Party because of the 2018 governor race. So a lot of candidates have to get out there and get lots of signatures, but my signature was the only one required to get me on the ballot. So because of that ease of access and the opportunity to be in a race that's going to be probably one of the top 10 most heavily funded by the two big parties, I figured it'd give me a platform to try to make some noise about liberty and reframe the argument, or at least add a different flavor to the argument in the political space.
All right. So on your page here, I see that you say your platform is pretty straightforward. You say, bring the troops home and end the terror wars, educational choices, abolish taxation, abolish drug laws, abolish the heavy-handed one-size-fits-all regulatory burdens in healthcare, and end the chaos of clock changing by passing the Daylight Act. So of all these things, which one in Congress do you think we could actually get done that would be your most strongest libertarian case that you can find some agreement on both sides with, of all of your platform policies?
Well, I think to some degree there's momentum on on all of those issues. Just one exciting thing today was President Trump talking about getting rid of the payroll tax system. And I don't think he can really just do that on his own. I think Congress would need to be involved with the appropriations process. But, it's a great idea. It's something I advocate for strongly. My focus, there are lots of terrible taxes out there, but I think the payroll tax is the worst example of the confiscatory policies of the state. I think there's a lot of momentum towards education choice, and getting rid of the stranglehold that the public school system has on the education funding and allowing it to follow the students and follow the families rather than being attached to the schools. So decentralized power is at the core of all of those issues. And my sort of pet issue, my fun topic, is the Daylight Act. And so in Florida, there was a bill passed in 2018. And I'm from South Florida and lived in Florida for a good portion of my life before moving to Michigan. But in Florida, they passed a bill for permanent daylight savings time. But there's a federal mandate that they change the clocks back and forth. There have been 12 states where some type of legislation or resolution has been passed. A bill to quote or hashtag lock the clock and end the chaos of clock changing has been brought to 46 states. So there's momentum on this issue as well. And I think in the time of COVID, where mental health stress is at an all-time high, that there's a real opportunity. And so the Daylight Act would simply remove the prohibition on permanent daylight savings time. So states that elect to implement that policy would not be federally forced to change their clocks back and forth. And so it's one of the issues that generally people think it's a little silly. They're kind of apathetic about it. A lot of times people think that it was like to help farmers, which is actually not true at all. Farmers dislike the policy, but it has like this, historical kind of misunderstanding. And It's a topic that I think it reflects the arbitrary policy of the state and how it just interferes with people, and the costs are not negligible. There's 28 additional car accident deaths per year from the spring forward, and there are many other costs, and it's one of those things that I think there's some bipartisan momentum for. And so I figure if I can raise a little bit of attention about it, maybe I can increase the likelihood that it would pass.
Okay. So in general, as all libertarians, getting the government out of the way of things. So people always bring up education. And one of the questions I have that, well, I guess I don't have. I have my own answer for it. But I'm curious where you stand on this. If we were to get the Department of Education out of our local education, what would prevent people in local communities or teachers from being a bigot, or being intolerant towards a student, or teaching, creationism when you don't like it? What sort of things do you think that could be put in place to protect those sort of situations?
Well, I think the source of the problem is we can always point to the monopoly of the state and how it takes away the choice and competition in the marketplace. And I think we see very often the high costs of bigotry in terms of the social capital and the way that the society responds to people who embrace really bad ideas. And I think that on the other side of it, there's plenty of bad ideas that go into public education because of the state. I think there's a lot of misleading content and or rigid ideology that impacts the public education system. So there are plenty of problems with it already. And one of the different takes that I have about the problem of the public education system is to focus on the public pension debt that has been racked up by so many states, especially states that have that have strong unions. Because of the political privileges that the unions have been able to secure over the years. And state legislatures in the 70s made promises that the legislators today are still having to pay for. And so, economically, calling that high time preference in terms of the motivation of politicians, where they're focused on their short-sighted goals. They're the immediate gratification of making big promises to their union and the connected political employees has resulted in large portions of current public funding to be allocated to old retirees, some of whom worked for 30 years, retired for 40 years. I think being from South Florida, I have more familiarity with that. So in Michigan, 33% of education payroll spending goes to pension debt. And with that dynamic, if you just, considering the demographics of today's teachers and students and the teachers of the past who are now retired, that clearly reflects systemic racism. And that's not the way that systemic racism is usually talked about. And I realize that, but I think that it's useful to point at the system as a force that, kicks the can down the road is a phrase that is commonly used, but it punishes the future for the benefits of the short-sighted politicians maintaining their power. And so it's not even just, the problems that they wreak on the present, but the problems that they're constantly causing, into the future. And so I think education choice as a way of breaking down the monopoly that they have in the education system and getting rid of the Department of Education as a part of that would be wonderful. I think we got a long way to go. I think and it's an issue that Corey DeAngelis from the Reason Foundation has a lot of great content on. He's very active in writing and working with other legislators to try to bring about good ideas that allow families and students to have more say over how they allocate their resources.
Okay. The other one you talk about is taxation, and I know beforehand you said you're not a fan of taxation as theft, but I'll let you explain for the audience there that you don't necessarily agree that it's theft.
No, well, I wouldn't say that. Please, my contention is that it's more accurate to say that taxation is extortion. That theft implies a dynamic that is sneaky and is often a one-time thing, right? A thief gets away with their little theft or burglary, but extortion is a constant presence that is motivated by fear, and people give out their funds to avoid being locked in a cage. And so I think extortion is a little bit more accurate. And I do not disagree with taxation as theft. I'm my only contention is that by shifting and reframing the definition, that we can better point to the problem of the state, right? It's not just that someone picked your pocket. It's that they, knocked you, or they threatened you, like, with a gun, or at the end of the gun with taking your wallet. And so they force you to get over, and you know that they're going to come back and ask for more in the future, right? So the dynamic, it's much bigger than theft. That's my contention, at least.
So some of the things I know you kind of like to talk in general, as you said, one of the reasons you ran this campaign was to express libertarian ideas. If you could clarify a misconception of libertarianism to people out there, what would it be?
To me, it simply comes down to peace. The non-aggression principle is a great way of putting it, where it's wrong to hurt people or take their stuff, and it doesn't matter if you're the government. That doesn't change the dynamic that it's wrong to hurt people and take their stuff. And so the beauty of libertarianism, and I think the reason why so many libertarians just love the philosophy for its consistency, and it's the ability to put so many ideas all into the same context, that has nothing to do with partisanship, but it simply focuses on reducing the role of the powerful government and the way that the politicians wield their power over the rest of us. And so, one of the concepts, and so in terms of the political rhetoric, a lot of times it's very difficult to embrace or to even engage with like the same language, where the like people use language that doesn't make much sense in the libertarian context, but they're arguing with each other, and it's difficult to reframe the rhetoric in a way that we can explain the libertarian principles. So a lot of times it takes some nuance, where it's not like you want to take away people's health care, or the way that the Republicans and Democrats talk to each other. We have to lay out the message of competition in the marketplace, and how the high cost of regulations and compliance costs drive up costs to consumers and make it harder for people to get the services and goods that they need. And one of the ways that I think about this differently than at least my opponents and most politicians is that lawmakers are not public servants. Lawmakers are, getting in the way of public servants and their ability to communicate with each other. And so the people within the political system are the problem, not the solution to the problems in our society.
Okay. I was just thinking while you were talking about that, and I think it was in Liberalism by Mises. He talked about how it's it wasn't libertarians in that time, but the classical liberalism, I guess you could say. It talked about the role of the state should be as minimal as possible, essentially, but it should be predictable. Like, it's no one's saying that we shouldn't have a government, but it should be predictable. Like, the consequences should be known of every action, and it should do as little interference and stick to protecting people from fraud and abuse and coercion, stuff like that. So I think you're right there on that. Now, if you are able, I don't believe you're actually going to get to debate this year. You were excluded, as are many candidates across the board, including Joe Jorgensen from the debates. If you could give a message to the people of the 8th District, what would it be? What would be the one, like, if you had the chance to stand up there for, a 2-3 minute, what would be your elevator pitch to your entire district?
I have no idea what the best message in terms of the, catch-all for every, average Republican and Democrat out there. And I think the libertarian messaging, it requires us to customize and find common ground with Democrats and find common ground with Republicans in the values that they think that they're advocating for. But a lot of times, because of the mess that the political system causes, they are really just, pitting, they're kind of falling for the partisan dogma. And so I think a lot of times Democrats and the social justice side of it, they think that advocating for more, regulatory policy and the expansive role of the state and healthcare and education, that these are forms of empathy, that these are taking care of people. But that's not what the government does. That's not what it's capable of. Everything that they do operates with the threat of violence. And then the Republicans, a lot of times, are just trying to conserve the good parts, and they see, the other team as the problem, trying to make government even more aggressive towards them. But obviously, but for the most part, Republicans don't, fight to make the government smaller. And I think, with my opponents in the race, both being agents of the state, they both worked for almost their entire careers in government, and in some of the worst organizations, the worst agencies in the government, with the CIA and ICE. And so the right reason to vote for Libertarian isn't because I'm going to win, right? The idea that you want to be a protest vote, or another reason that I at least like to vote Libertarian, is that that the person that you're voting for is not going to, be a part of the atrocities. If you vote for someone who might win and they get into public office, then there are going to be things that that you're complicit in supporting them, that they do, that cause trouble and violence in society. So it's a different reason, and I think that there are opportunities. I guess to go back to your question, is the best message is anti-war. We want peace, and that's the libertarian message, most of all, both on the foreign level and in terms of reducing the role of the federal government and its meddling in so many parts of our lives. So yes, peace.
All right. So the other thing I always want to hear from candidates, and I believe you do hold a position in your either county or state Libertarian Party, is what advice would you give to people to get involved in the Libertarian Party and help local candidates like yourself?
Well, so I would say my libertarianism started with Dr. Ron Paul in 2007 with his presidential race. And I never had much interest in the Libertarian Party. It was very small. Like I said, in Florida, there wasn't an affiliate in my county when I lived there at the time. And I never had much interest in, the political system generally. I don't see politicians as the solution to the problem. And the Libertarian Party is like playing a game that we're not going to win. And so I think the point of getting involved in the Libertarian Party, most of all, is to find like-minded people. And that's a big part of what I enjoy so much about the Libertarian Party of Michigan, especially some of my members in my county affiliate, and the conversations and the ability to have ideological conversations with other people in your local area and talk about the ideas of liberty, and just there's a certain joy about knowing that there are other people out there who see the same way that we do, and to find that common ground with fellow libertarians. The Libertarian Party is a pretty good source of those people, at least I think, and I hope so. And if you are skeptical, then maybe you could make it better. So I think the Libertarian Party is growing, and I'm proud of Joe and Spike. I think that there is a big upgrade to the party. One thing that I became a lot more comfortable being a Libertarian Party member was the upgrade to the chair position. I think that Joe Bishop Henchman is a really positive influence on the party, and is trying to grow the party, and has a focus on the problems of the tax code, which I have a lot of affection for his position and his work on that. So yeah, I think if you want to be a part of the Libertarian Party, you could be a leader in a local organization probably pretty quickly. And so yeah, I think it's fun. That's the main reason.
I agree, and even if it is, I don't know what you guys do there around here. We meet monthly, and we all meet. We have a couple beers, we eat food, we discuss plans for what we're doing with what candidates, planning different events. And then there's always the intellectual debates that break out over, who knows what it might be. I think at our last one, we debated the finer points of intellectual property and where is real and non-real property and all of the different nuances to that aspect. So if those sort of things sound fun to you, definitely show up at the Libertarian Party meeting. So, but with that, what sort of things can people do for your campaign? Do you need donations? Do you need signs? Do you need door knockers? Or are you just you're going to run this thing and go out, have some fun, and make some noise, kind of?
Yeah, that's my main thing. Yeah, so I'm not taking donations. I'm not dealing with all of that stuff. I've basically like I said, handled my campaign myself in the kind of DIY method. I have a lot more interviews lined up and podcast appearances that I'm looking forward to, talking to other libertarian people for the most part, and other, people who'd be interested in talking to me or recommendations to be on other podcasts. I'd, be grateful for the opportunity. I prefer to talk about these ideas as much as possible. I hop into conversations on, Facebook and Twitter sometimes. And to me, my message isn't that I'm trying to preach the message of liberty but to simply share my opinion on things and to get better at that, and also to try to learn what sounds persuasive to people and when I'm just literally just making noise. And that's my approach.
All right. Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone down here, make sure you go follow Joe's Facebook page and his new website. It's coming along. He'll have some more up there, I think, soon. But Joe, just wanted to say thank you for coming on and doing what you're doing to share the message out there. So thank you.